Gemara in Tainis brings down a well-known event, but pshat in the event is very difficult to understand. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was known as a person of tremendous mofsim. As a matter of fact, oftentimes when the Chachamim needed something, they would send him as an agent because he was known as an ish melumad who was learned in Nisim. In any case, Chad bi Shemashi, one Friday night, Chazi Lebrate, he saw his daughter, Davas Atziva. He saw that his daughter was very distraught. Amalabiti, he said, my daughter, L'mayit Savis, why are you so upset? What are you so bothered by? Amra lei, she said to him, Kli shel chometz, nischalef li bekli shel shemen. I made a mistake. Instead of reaching into the shemen, the oil, I poured in chometz, I poured in vinegar into the Shabbos candles, vidlakni min or Shabbos, and I lit the Shabbos candles from vinegar. Because immediately, as soon as she lit, she was makabel Shabbos. She now couldn't relight, and in just a moment or two, the lights would clearly go out because vinegar doesn't light. Therefore, she was very upset. Amar labiti, he said, my daughter, my ichpaslach, what do you care? Misha'amar l'shemen v'yudlok, kuyom l'chometz v'yudlok. The one who said that oil should burn will say that vinegar will burn. Tana, the Brisa tells us, hayadolik v'holech kol yom kulo, that vinegar that she put by mistake into the candles actually lit the entire day. Acheviu mimeno orla avdola. It lasted not just Friday night, the normal few hours. It lasted straight through the Shabbos, all the way till they were able to take a light from it from Havdalah. And that's the Gemara. And I believe that if you look at this Gemara critically, you'll see that there are two very, very significant questions. Number one, there is a principle, ein somchen al hanes. We do not rely on miracles. As a matter of fact, you're not allowed to. If you decide that you're a tremendous Baal B'tachon and you go play in traffic, not only is it very questionable whether you're going to survive, if you do, menakilim mischiyosa, they take away from your merits because you're not allowed to. Hashem created a system called derech hateva, and we're obligated to go according to that system. We don't rely on miracles, and it seems that what Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa did was relying on a miracle which seems to violate the normal operating principles. That's question number one. But question number two, I think, is even more profound. And that is, listen to the words that Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa said. Misha Amar l'shemen v'yudlok, the one who said that oil shall burn will say that vinegar shall burn. Now I believe that that's patently false. Hashem created a world with systems, with laws. Hashem created the world with certain guidelines that it operates according to. Heat tends to rise, gases tend to expand, heavy objects tend to fall. Those are the guiding principles via which Hashem runs the world. One of those guiding principles is that oil lights, vinegar doesn't. How could Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa say the words, Hashem who said that oil shall burn, shall say that vinegar shall burn, when it's patently false? It's not true. Hashem said oil should burn, and Hashem said vinegar will not burn. So I'd like to see if we could get a better understanding in terms of this Gemara and get a better understanding of Hashem's relationship to all of physicality. Now let me start with an important observation. If you study the wild kingdom, you'll see a tremendous amount of diversity. You'll see species upon species, each one so varied and so different that it's almost mind-boggling. From the giraffe that's 18 feet tall to the rabbit that's 10 inches tall. From the snake that slithers on the ground to the kangaroo that hops across the plains. From a bull that weighs 2,000 pounds to the hummingbird that weighs 1/10 of a pound. You see such differences in locomotion, types of foods they eat, type of structures. The wild kingdom is so phenomenally diverse. And here's the question. Why do that? Why create so many different varied species? If you tell me you need a beast of burden, so make a cow, make an ox. If you tell me you need something to carry man, make a horse. But you don't need 1.5 million species of animals for any good purpose. Make a few, one or two, make it a dozen, but you don't need that many. And the Chovos HaLevavos says one of the main reasons why Hashem made such diversity, so many almost infinite types of species, is to show mankind His wisdom, His capacity. It's correct. You don't need the rest of the 8.5 million species of living things, from the flora to the grass, to the trees, to the insects. They estimate between 10 million and 100 million different types of living things on the planet. You don't need it. Why did Hashem create it? So that the human should look and say, that's astonishing. The wisdom, the vast wisdom and understanding that went into that. And by doing that, the human will have an eye glimpse to the wisdom of his Creator. And I believe that it's incumbent upon us to do exactly that. To study the wild, to study the world in which we live, and come to a deeper understanding as to our Creator's relationship to it. And let me share with you an observation or two. There is a wonderful butterfly conservatory near Niagara Falls. I remember I went to it when it was first opened. I love to take my children to these type of exhibits, and I was astonished by the beauty that you see. 2,000 different types of butterflies, iridescent pinks, yellows, reds, types you've never even thought that existed. But the beauty of it is you walk into this habitat. You walk in and the butterflies are freely flying around. They'll land on your shirt, they'll land on your leg, and you're not supposed to touch them because you'll rub off the scales, but you're able to watch them up close. Interestingly enough, 14,000 square feet of exhibit. It cost them at the time, over 10 years ago, it cost them over $10 million. Now, let's keep in mind what's needed. 24/7 constant vigilance, because the temperature must remain exact. The humidity must remain exactly there. Okay. Now, as we were going through the various exhibits, I noticed something very interesting. You saw the cocoon, you saw the butterfly, but there was a stage in the butterfly's development that was noticeably absent. As you know, it starts with the egg hatches and you get the caterpillar eats for 2 weeks to a month, basically feeds itself. It's a feeding tube. Then the caterpillar will find a quiet place through its silk, it will weave this beautiful cocoon, the crystallisis, around itself. It'll hang there. 2 weeks later emerges the butterfly. The cocoons were there, the butterflies were there, but no caterpillars. So I asked one of the curators, why is it that there are no caterpillars? He said, caterpillars? Are you kidding? They would eat us out of house and home. We couldn't possibly keep enough vegetation here to feed the caterpillars, who have no choice but to import them in the cocoon and hatch them here. And I said to myself, isn't that interesting? $10 million, constant vigilance, and they can't create an ecosystem to support one little species, just the butterfly. 14,000 square feet. Would you like to know how many square miles there are in Africa? Would you like to know that 2.3 million square miles makes up just the Amazon rainforest? 2.3 million square miles, the vastness of the species, the unbelievable diversity of life there, and each one creating its own balanced ecosystem. And not just its own, but if you study the Amazon jungle, you'll see that there are vastly different ecosystems. There's the upper top where the light shines of the trees. There's the middle section. There's the bottom. Within one small area, they've counted 4,000 species of insects. When I say a species of insect, as different as a beetle is to the buzzing bee, different to the ant, within a tree, they'll find hundreds of different species, such a diverseness of life that it's actually astonishing. And here's the question. How does it just sort of exist? You know, keep in mind, no one is watching the thermostat. No one's doing the humidity check. And the interesting thing is that whenever biologists attempt to make a biosphere, they always come up with these great plans to make a self-contained system. And whenever they do it, invariably what happens within a day, within a week, within a few months, it fails. Life within it dies. Because the balance of life is so delicate. It's so phenomenally delicate that if there isn't some constant change that man brings to it, it will fall apart. Yet the world has so many ecosystems, so intricate, so interdependent, and yet somehow they exist. And here's the observation. If you know a man who owns a small business, 15 employees, what happens if he leaves for 2 weeks? So assuming that he has good employees, assuming that he's put in place good systems with checks and balances, he'll be able to leave for 2 weeks and come back and still find his business intact. What if he leaves for 2 months? What if he leaves for a year? Guys, I'm going to Crete, see you a year later. I guarantee he will come back and there will be no business. Because all of the systems, all of the very nicely worked out orders of things to happen are useless unless someone's there checking, unless someone's there monitoring, unless someone's making the changes when things don't work out. So here's the question. Who's watching the ecospheres? Who's maintaining the carbon dioxide levels? Who's making sure that the pollution levels somehow always manage to be below where they need to be? But each of these biosystems are so interdependent and so delicate, what it screams out is to the fact that there is someone watching it. And there's a Rambam, it's very important to know, it's Hilchos Yesodei Torah, Perek Beis, who says there is a mitzvah aseh deoraisa, it is a positive commandment from the Torah to love Hashem. Says the Rambam, how does one come to love Hashem? Says the Rambam, it's really quite simple. He says, B'shah is born in Adam Ma'asav. When a man concentrates upon Hashem's actions and Hashem's creations, on the Floim Agdolim, the great wonders, he'll see such wisdom that doesn't have a limit and doesn't have an end. He'll see infinite wisdom in the creation. When he sees that miyad, immediately he'll ohev u'meshabech u'mefa'er. Immediately he loves, he praises, and he sings out accolades to the one who created it. U'misave, and he has a tremendous taiva, tremendous desire, leida Hashem agadol, to know this great God. When you study the world and you see the wisdom, you're amazed by it, you're awed by it, you sing out praise, you want to be meshabeach, and you have a tremendous desire to know better the person, the creator who made it. And that is how a person comes to Avas Hashem. And if you look at the world and you see the fact that the sun always rises, the tides always pull, the ocean never exceeds its bounds, and a world continues beautifully, flawlessly, you see the wonders of our Creator, and you come to a sense of Avas Hashem. However, the problem is that for most of us, we're no longer affected by it. We can open a biology book, we can watch things in various media forms, and we're not astounded by it. And I'd like to share with you why that is. I believe that we're so overdosed by the wisdom of the Creator that we forget how wondrous it is. And I think it's incumbent upon us to put the wow back into nature. If a person looks at nature from a clean slate and begins asking some critical questions, I think you'll come to a tremendous reverence for nature and thereby a tremendous respect for the Creator of it all. And I'd like to share with you just an observation or two that may help. Imagine for a minute the following. Imagine I'm running a non-profit. And imagine, Lu Yitzur, theoretically, that this non-profit was having financial difficulty. Now, I know that's hard to imagine, but imagine it for a minute. Okay. So imagine that I'm running this non-profit and having some financial issues, so I decide it's getting rough, it's getting really tough. I find myself a Kabbalist. I find someone on Baba Sali's level, and I ask him for a bracha. And he says, listen, I like what you're doing, I'm going to help you out. But you have to listen to me and do what I say exactly as I say it. Sure? I want you to go to Walmart and buy 60 Matchbox cars. All right, listen, another man's a famous Kabbalist. What am I going to do? Fine, I go to Walmart, I buy 60 Matchbox cars. He says, now listen to me very carefully. I want you to go into the parking lot, and I want you to lay them out, and this part is very important. Make sure that there's 6 feet between each car. 6 feet between each car. Fine, I lay the cars out. He says, come back in. He lights some black candles. He says some incantations. I look out the window, and those little 2-inch Matchbox cars grow into big, huge vehicles. SUVs, sports cars, Cadillacs, they're all there. He says, now go sell them and support your Mossad. Mazel tov. What? What? Huh? Astonishing. A miracle. He's a miracle man. Hashem is great. It's unbelievable. Now, my friends, I want you to hear what I'm saying to you. Have you ever seen a corn stalk? Have you ever walked in a field and seen 6 feet tall with actual grains, with actual ears of corn on it? Have you ever seen a wheat stalk? Have you ever seen an apple tree? Well, here's the observation. The food that we eat literally comes out of the ground. Corn, with the sweetness, with the texture, with the coloring, comes out of the ground. But I want to share with you a big chiddush. There are no elves in the ground magically mixing the compounds, creating the yellow color, the sweetness, and somehow putting the corn onto the ear. It just comes out of the ground, just like that. Including bananas and apples and pineapple, just out of the ground. Each one vastly different, each one with amazing flavors, tastes, textures, and each one just on its own coming out of the ground. If we were to comprehend the wonder of that, we would be astonished. And I've heard, I've never been zocheh to see this inside, but I've heard told over that when Yeshua brought the Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael, he said, I'm going to show you miracles now that you've never seen before. Keep in mind that any Jew who was 20 or older leaving Mitzrayim died in the Midbar. The vast majority of the Jews who actually went into Eretz Yisrael were born in the Midbar. Being born in the desert means that they were brought up on man. Their daily food was man that came from the heaven, ended up at their doorstep, but they had never experienced agriculture. And Yeshua said, I'm going to show you something fantastic and phenomenal. When he brought the Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael, he took seeds, he placed them in the ground, and he said, water these and come back day after day, day after day. And after a few weeks, a few months, it began sprouting, things coming out of the ground, and food, literal food that allowed a human being to live off of, came growing out of the ground. The Dor, the generation that had been born in the Midbar, were astonished. They'd never seen this before. And they had a real sense of wow, because growing up on man means you get to see with fresh eyes the wonder called nature and the wonder of your food coming out of the ground. And I believe that oftentimes we miss some of the obvious, but some of the most profound chidushim that you could ever imagine. And if you're having a little bit of trouble with emunah, I have 3 questions, and I claim that these 3 questions will guarantee bring you to a powerful sense of emunah. Here are the 3 questions. If you've ever studied an orange tree, a big, strong tree, nice trunk, branches, and hundreds, if not thousands of oranges supported on the branches. Okay. As you probably know, it didn't begin as this big, strong tree with hundreds of thousands of oranges. It began as a seed. You ever see, when you open the orange, inside the orange is this white seed. Well, from that seed came this big, strong tree. With this big, strong tree came all the oranges that are on it. Okay, so here's my first question I'd like to share with you. Where did the stuff of the tree come from? The tree weighs, I don't know, a couple of thousand pounds. Where did all of that stuff that makes up the tree, the wood and all that stuff, where did that come from? So you probably say, come on, Rabbi, it comes from the ground, right? It started as a seed, but all that stuff came from the ground. Well, I'd like to share with you that that's not correct. In fact, I'll prove it to you. If you were to take 1,000 pounds of dirt, put it in a metal tub, put an orange seed in that metal tub and water it and allow it to grow for 10 years, a big, strong orange tree will be there, but you'll still have 1,000 pounds of dirt. Would you like to know where the stuff of the tree comes from? It comes from a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis means carbon dioxide, water, sunlight, and it's synthesized. Something in the tree, the green of the leaves absorb the sunlight, mixes the carbon dioxide with the water, and it synthesizes, creates new thing called the stuff of the tree. So the answer to the question, where did the thousands of pounds of the tree come from? The answer is photosynthesis, out of thin air. This is not science fiction. This is not like a Baba Misa. This is basic science. Photosynthesis means the tree synthesizes, creates anew all the stuff of the tree. So again, question number one is, where did the stuff of the tree come from? Okay. Question number two. If you ever bite into an orange, you'll know it has a very unique flavor. Very sweet. A little bit of tang, but citrusy, but really sweet. Here's question number two. Where did the sweetness of the orange come from? Now let's remember, the tree began as a seed. You ever bite into the seed of an orange? What does it taste like? It's very bitter. What does the water that goes into the tree taste like? Basically water kind of tastes. You ever hear the expression, I'm going to make you eat dirt? What does the dirt in the ground taste like? It tastes, I don't know, it's pretty bitter, right? I've never eaten dirt, but it's kind of bitter. So here's the question. The dirt is bitter. The seed is bitter. The water is kind of tasteless. Where does the sweetness of the orange come from? You know what the answer is? Photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide, water, sunlight synthesizes, creates anew the flavor. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that kind of interesting? The sweet, tangy, citrus flavor, all of it comes through from the air, from nowhere. Okay, so that's question number two, where the sweetness comes from. But question number three is the most profound. What color is the orange? Right, good. Okay, good. Go to the front of the class. The orange is orange. Okay, now here's the point. The seed is white. The water is colorless. The dirt is kind of brown, muddy, whatever. Where did the orange color come from? And don't tell me from China, because dig down to China, there's no orange in the ground. Would you like to know where the orange of the orange comes from? Photosynthesis. All right, come on, you expect me to believe that? Do you expect me to believe that? But that's basic science. No elves mixing colors. Oh, got a little bit of red. Oh, yeah, a little yellow. Okay, orange, you're good at it. Do it a tint, yeah. No. The tree synthesizes carbon dioxide, water, sunlight, and poof, you have the beautiful shade of orange. What, are you kidding me? Is that possible? It's so astonishingly unlikely to be that if it weren't for the fact that it's true, you would laugh me out of the building. No one would believe you. And I guarantee 150 years ago, no one would believe you. In fact, 100 years ago, no one would believe you either. But this is basic scientific fact. And here's the observation. Oh my goodness, that's astonishing. Hashem created a tree. A tree. By the way, do you know what the IQ of a tree is? I don't know. I'm sorry. Who was the president in 1853? Would you mind helping me? A tree doesn't have an IQ. It's not. It's an inanimate object. But there's such wisdom that's contained within that living organism called a tree that it produces oranges with all of the sophistication, with the little tiny taste gels, with the skin, with this fragrance. Everything in there is synthesized by the tree. And if you begin studying nature with an open mind, with an open eye, you see astonishing wonders after wonders, from corn to potatoes to cucumbers to lettuce. Who made the cellular walls of the lettuce hard? Who told the ground that it should be crispy, so the walls should form in hard cells so that the human should crunch into it? It is not the earthworms or the aphids that design the lettuce inside the ground. And who told the watermelon to contain approximately 95% water with that beautiful pink color, with that wonderful, delicious flavor? Again, it is not the beetles or the ants. From in the ground itself, from a tiny little black seed, comes this 15-pound watermelon. Perfect, succulent, delicious. And when you think about it, it's astonishing. And when you think about it, you say to yourself, there is such wonder. If I see such wondrous things in this creation, what does it tell me about the Creator? And if you've ever seen a symphonic orchestra playing, and you see the 71 instruments playing perfectly on time, beautiful harmonies, the wings, the strings, the winds, everything beautifully performing, you don't have to see the conductor to know that someone wrote the music. You don't have to see the conductor waving the baton to know that someone organized this orchestra, someone's controlling it. When you see the vastness of this creation, the intricate systems, the beauty, you see a Creator. If this is the creation, what does it tell me about the Creator? And you begin to have a sense, as the Rambam says, of love of Hashem. You wish to be Mashabeach Hashem, praise Hashem, and more than anything you desire to see Hashem. But it requires an eye to understand that which is happening, and it requires putting back the wow into nature, being astonished by a sunrise and a sunset, and being astonished that a fish somehow from the very water that I would drown in can extract the oxygen. How does it breathe? It's got a gill. What does that mean? I don't know, but it can take oxygen out of the water. I can't. Who made the air 21% oxygen? Not 23, not 18, but 21%. And wherever you go throughout the globe, it's that perfect balance, because that's what the human needs. And when you begin studying the amazing systems, you say, if this is the creation, what does it tell me about the Creator? Provided that you put the wow back into it, provided that you understand it. And I believe that that's pshat in this Gemara. You see, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa woke up in the morning and he saw a blade of grass. And he said to himself, that's astonishing. From a little seed comes the blade of grass, comes the tree, the oceans, the rivers, the animals. And he said to himself, there is a Creator. But he saw the Creator in everything that happened, and he saw the wisdom of the Creator, and more than anything, he saw that these systems don't happen on their own. They don't just exist on their own. He saw the wondrous world that Hashem created, and he said there is such a nace. You know what that nace is? That nace is something called nature. It says in Ramban, nature is just a masquerade. Nature is the laws via which Hashem continues to run the world. But when you see a blade of grass growing, says Ramban, that means Hashem is making that grow, keeping it in existence. When you see a tree coming up from the ground, that's Hashem giving life to everything in existence. Nature are the rules, the systems, the laws via which Hashem continues to run them. But it's Hashem in every part of the world. And when Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa saw something in nature, he saw God. And therefore he saw Shemin. He saw oil being madlik. In our understanding, do you know what it means for oil to light? Who told the atomic energy to be released in that particular configuration? Who told the energy bonds to release in a flame that gives off heat? He saw Hashem because that's what he saw and understood. And therefore he understood the vast miracle of oil lighting. And he said quite simply, there's no distinction between oil lighting and vinegar lighting. The same way Hashem can make oil light just like that, Hashem can make vinegar, because to him everything was a nace. There was no great chiddush for vinegar to burn, because if oil could burn, what do you mean oil should burn? Why should it burn? It burns because Hashem said it should burn, and he saw that so vividly, so palpably, that there was no distinction between being vinegar burning or a rock burning or anything else. He understood all of it was a vast miracle. And therefore, I believe that is why it wasn't a nace, because to him all of nature was a nace. And it wasn't a situation of saying it's beyond Hashem, or Hashem said it's not going to happen, because everything that he experienced was Hashem's nisim, and therefore he said to his daughter, it makes no distinction. The difficulty that we have is we came into this world when we were already mature. From a young and childish perspective, we were already exposed to everything, and it loses the wow. We forget how wondrous, how astonishing it is, and it no longer moves us. And I think it's very worthwhile for a person to train their tongue, to say, wow, that's astonishing. And I'd like to share with you an exercise that I have that I think will be very helpful. If you would, study the wild kingdom and ask one question, I almost guarantee it will change the way you relate to your Creator. That one question that you have to train yourself to ask on a regular basis is, who taught you to do that? Simple. Who taught you to do that? And let me explain to you what I mean. If you ever watch a large winged bird, even a crow, and certainly a falcon or any of the larger winged birds, you'll note invariably it does the following. Before it flaps its wings, it jumps up. It'll first take a vertical lift, jump up, and then, only then will it flap its wings. Every time. Would you like to know why that is? It's really quite simple. The bird is rather squat. If it opens its long wings here and flaps now, it would smash its wings into the ground and break them. It takes a jump up first, getting some lift, then it could flap its wings because it's now off the ground and it flies off. Who taught you to do that? And if you're going to tell me that the mommy bird taught the baby bird that, I'll prove to you that that's not correct. It takes a German scientist to think of this particular experiment, but they decided to take pigeons. Normally, a pigeon at a certain age will be trained by the mother or on its own will fly out of the nest. They took baby pigeons right after they were hatched and put them in a tube, inside a metal tube, so the pigeon could not flex its wings. And they took two broods. One brood of pigeons they allowed to be in the nest and go through the normal process of development. The other brood they kept in these tubes so it couldn't flex its wings. When the first brood was ready to fly out of the nest, and they were actually developed enough to fly, and they left the nest, the scientists took the pigeons outside of the tubes and threw them in the air. Instantly, immediately, those pigeons who had been brought up in the tubes flew perfectly. They knew exactly how to fly, when to fly, and what you understand quickly is that all of the instincts that are necessary for the survival of the species are implanted into the animal. Is there some communication, parent to child, some, but all of the instincts that are needed for the survival of the individual and the species on the whole are put into the animal at birth. Human beings are rather comical to watch when they walk. If you ever watch a 11-month-old toddle, they're called toddlers because they toddle and fall, toddle and fall, toddle and fall, and they're very cute to watch. It doesn't happen that way in the African Serengeti. The wildebeest, which is kind of like the cow of the African plains, is born and 5 minutes after birth is walking, running, keeping pace with the adults. Because if it doesn't, the jackals, the hyenas, and everyone else will eat it. So if you watch a wildebeest being born, you see it come out of its mother's uterus. It's born, lands, kind of stands up. Within 5 minutes, it's walking. Within 10 minutes, it's running, keeping up with a pack of adults. But here's the most astonishing part. The baby toddler, human baby, has got 2 legs. Left, right. Can't quite coordinate it. The wildebeest has got 4 of them. But the astonishing part is different animals walk with different gaits. A dog typically walks front paws, back paws, front paws, back paws. Pretty simple coordination. The wildebeest, as well as most horses, don't walk that way. It's front, left, and back right, then back, left, and front right. This sort of cross gait. The wildebeest, and they'll show movies of its slowed down motion, the speed of coordination is to the microsecond. They're running with the most fantastic coordination. If they miss by a hairbreadth, they fall to the ground, and the coyotes or jackals and hyenas eat them. But at birth, within 5 minutes, they're running perfectly with the adults at 30 miles an hour. And you say to yourself, who taught you to do that? Who taught you the coordination? Who taught you to move the muscles that way? And if you begin asking that question, who taught you to do that, what you quickly see is there's an astonishing amount of wisdom out there. Here's 1 or 2 more observations. As you know, it's starting to get cold. Many of the older Jews start becoming snowbirds. They migrate to Florida, which is fine. Here's a very simple thought. I get lost in my basement. Birds don't get lost. Canadian geese migrate from Canada all the way to Florida, 3,000 miles. Who taught them to fly south? If they were just hatched, they never experienced a winter before. So how do they know that another month or two there's going to be frost on the ground, their food source isn't going to be there, and it's going to be frigid, their feathers won't be able to warm them up? But forget that. How do they know how to fly south? How do they know which direction it is? So scientists now believe that within the brain of most birds there are trace elements of lead. As you know, the poles are magnetic. They can sense the poles, the South Pole, and they're attracted to it. Hence they fly due south in the winter and head the other way in the summer. Now that's pretty impressive, but watch this one. Today we have email, we have faxes, we have cell phones. What did you do in the good old days if you went to war and you wanted to communicate back home? So you sent your homing pigeon, right? Your homing pigeon, you would take out a few hundred miles with you into battle, and if you wanted to send a message back to the king, you'd tie a note to the foot of the homing pigeon, and it would head right back home. Scientists have done this. They've taken trained homing pigeons, put them into the trunk of a car, and they'll drive around left, right, circle, back, circle. Open the trunk of the car 150 miles away from the starting point, and the homing pigeon hits the air and heads right back home and lands right back where it started from. Who taught you to do that? Who gave you the wisdom? Most human beings can't navigate the subway system, yet this bird somehow knows to head south. But it's not just large birds, monarch butterflies. You know what a butterfly is? A butterfly is a tiny little worm with wings. Would you like to know what the IQ of the monarch butterfly is? The brain is, the head is the size of a pin. But it flies 3,000 miles, and they'll watch millions and millions of these monarch butterflies land on the same beaches that their ancestors landed on, even though this is their first inaugural flight. They've never been there before. But they all fly the same flight pattern, all end up in the same beaches, and all end up thousands of miles from where they were born. And who taught you to do that? Now, if you're not astonished yet, this one you could take right to the bank. Try this one on me. Go to your home, fill up your kitchen sink with warm water. Put in some dish detergent into the warm water, mush it around. Then go find yourself a duck in the pond, put the duck into the sink, and what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen is the duck is going to drown. You know why the duck is going to drown? Because the reason why a duck is able to float on the water is because its wings, which are made of feathers, are covered with a beautiful sheen of oil. The oil keeps the water out. If you put dish detergent in your sink, put the duck in, the dish detergent fights the oil, the water penetrates the feathers, the duck sinks like a brick to the bottom of the sink. Don't try it at home, folks, but it is true. Now here's a very important observation. How does the duck get the oil all over its feathers? Well, as you may know, there are certain glands that secrete oil, typically under the wings. And the duck will basically preen. It doesn't know what it's doing, it doesn't understand, but all day long it takes its mouth and preens and smears the oil onto its feathers. Do you ever notice it always keeps those feathers straight, always smeared with oil? It doesn't go through the mental process of oil and water doesn't mix. I better make sure I'm all covered with oil. But don't worry about it. Into its nature has been inserted the wisdom necessary. The swan has 25,000 feathers. 25,000 feathers, and it's got a very long neck because that's what's required to take the oil and smear it all over its feathers, because otherwise it would sink like a rock. But because it has this instinct to preen, it's constantly fresh, constantly floating on the surface. And when you study this, what you should be saying to yourself is, that's astonishing, that's amazing. Who thought of this stuff? But I'm not done. modern man has found some interesting phenomena that he didn't realize he was going to discover. The American bald eagle, that's the symbol of freedom, tough, fierce. It's a national bird. As you probably know, some 20, 30 years ago, the national symbol was on the verge of extinction. And scientists weren't really clear why. It wasn't that there were more predators for the bald eagle. It wasn't even that there were terrible ecological damages of pollution. And they really didn't know why. Interestingly enough, DDT was banned. DDT is a very powerful insecticide. As you probably know, for the past 15, maybe 20 years, we've had a lot of problem with bugs in vegetables because there's very few insecticides that are quite as effective as DDT. DDT got rid of all of the aphids and worms and flying insects, but this is what they found. The DDT would be placed on the crops by the farmers. During the rain, some of the DDT would be taken by the rain into the soil. During the next rain, it would wash through the soil, and eventually some trace elements of the DDT would get into the streams around the farmland. Therefore, they put bans on using DDT, and a very strange thing happened. The bald eagle population soared, went back up, and it's no longer on the endangered species list anymore. And it took scientists a long time to put together the 2 plus 2. Would you like to know what the math is? It's really quite interesting. You see, the eagle loves to eat fish. However, the eagle is not a particularly good fisherman. The pelican is. Typically, an eagle will stay way, way up high in the sky and wait for a pelican to swoop down and catch the salmon, or catch the bass, catch the fish. Then the eagle, spotting the pelican, will whoosh down. The pelican sees either it's going to be lunch or give up lunch. It throws the fish in the air. The eagle grabs the fish in the air, always turns the head of the fish forward because that's the most aerodynamically way to fly, and it will fly back to its nest, feed its young, and eat the fish itself. Interesting enough, the DDT that was put into the farmlands by the farmers would slowly seep through the topsoil, would get into the streams. The fish would swallow some of this DDT. The eagles, when they would eat these fish, would get trace elements of DDT in their system. So you'll say, so what? So what's the next step? When they would lay their eggs, the eggs had too thin a covering. You see, the DDT affected somehow their body, and their eggs were laid with a thinner cover. And as a result, when they would sit on their eggs, they would crush their eggs. Once DDT was eliminated from the topsoil, the eggs were born full, strong size again, and now the eagles would sit on the eggs, they would hatch the next brood, and within a few years, the population rebounded and was back up there. Now, gentlemen, do you know what a micrometer is? Micrometer measures microns. Microns are hair breadth, fractions of hair breadth. Do you know what the difference between a viable egg and one that cracks is? It's a difference that can be measured only with a micrometer. Who told the bald eagle to put just this amount of eggshell? Because forget the fact that it's the perfect geometric shape. Forget the fact that it's a perfect environment to allow the next generation to form, but it has to be the right thickness. With the DDT, it's too thin. Now that it's perfect, and when you study this, you say, Marabu Masech Hashem, this is astonishing, this is wondrous. And at the risk of sharing just one more thought, here's the last one. If you look this time of year, you'll see many, many nests in the tree. And I challenge you to look for the robin's nest, because you'll always find the robin's nest all the way out at the edge of a branch. Now here's an interesting thing to think about. Let's say you were a bird and you were making a nest. Wouldn't you pick the spot closest to the trunk where the branch is really strong? That's a safe place to bring up the next generation, right? Why is it that the robin always makes its nest all the way at the edge of a branch where it's really weak? Well, the reason really is quite simple. The enemy of the robin is the squirrel. Not that the squirrel eats the robin, it doesn't. But the squirrel eats the robin eggs. And here's the problem. If the robin would lay its eggs close to the trunk of the tree where the branches are strong. The squirrels would climb up the tree, eat the robin eggs, and there would be no next generation. Because of that, the robins put their nests all the way at the very edge of the branch. The squirrel sees robin eggs, climbs up the trunk, climbs out the branch. All of a sudden it gets a little weaker and weaker and weaker, and it says to itself, if I take a few more steps, I'm going to fall down. It traces back its steps, and the robin eggs are safe. Who taught the robin to do that? The robin never had an egg before. It doesn't even know about squirrels because squirrels don't attack robins. How does it know to put the nest all the way at the edge of a weak branch? And when you study this and you think about it, you say this is astonishing. If this is the wisdom in the creation, what does it tell me about my Creator? And if a person thinks about these type of things long enough, they have a very different experience in life. And if you've ever had the problem that davening just doesn't work, I don't know, I would love to daven with kavanah, I would love to speak out praises to Hashem, but it just doesn't work. I have one simple solution. The Chovos HaLevavos tells us, find a Kiddush every day in the Bria. Find something novel, find something new, find something that you never knew about, and think about it for 30 seconds before you daven. And say that's astonishing, that's wondrous. And then daven. And I guarantee it's a different tefillah. It's a very different experience. Because you say, wow, this is wondrous. This is astonishing. And you want to sing out praises to your Creator. Exactly as the Rambam says, you feel a taiva, a desire to know Hashem. And you have a desire to be close to Hashem. It requires work. And it requires thinking. I think there's a tremendous lesson to learn from Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. This man experienced God daily, but not just daily, on a constant basis. Because he opened his eyes and saw the wonders of this creation, and he said, this is astonishing. He looked at an orange tree, and who in the world made the stuff of the orange tree? Where did the stuff come? Photosynthesis. Where did the flavor, the sweetness come from? Photosynthesis. Where did the color come from? Photosynthesis. But if you think about it, it's beyond belief. That's the wisdom of our Creator. And if you study the wisdom in the wild kingdom, if you study the bird that knows how to preen, if you study the wildebeest that knows how to walk, not just to walk, but knows how to run, if you study all of the various animals, and you see the fact is that every one of them has all of the instincts that they need for their survival, you see the wonders of your Creator. And when you study this infinite world, you see a fantastic exhibition of Hashem, and you feel a tremendous desire to be close to Hashem, to sing Hashem's praises. I'd like to close with one last thought. The point here being that everything that we take for granted, we can relearn, and we could put the wow back into nature if we study it in its vastness, in its sophistication, and put back the wonder. And probably the easiest way to do that is thanks to modern science. As you probably know, software today takes an awesome amount of time to write. It used to be measured in man hours, and then it was measured in man months. It's now measured in man years. In 1983, when Windows first came out, it was supposed to be launched on a particular date, and there was a big delay. It was supposed to be launched on November 10th. It was actually 6 months later because the project took 6 man years to complete. That means they had to have teams of people working day in, day out. It took a total of 6 man years. Nowadays, software programs are not measured in man years, they're measured in man decades, in hundreds of years. Meaning to say, to write a software program now, they'll have 100 programmers, and approximately it'll take a year. If they want to do it in 6 months, they'll put 200 programs on it. It takes sometimes thousands of man years to write various software programs. The space shuttle was launched, and scientists estimated how much coding went into the space shuttle. Keep in mind, it's not just an onboard computer, but you have all of the various different systems. And they measured that all of the computer programming on the space shuttle would have taken approximately 22,000 man years to write. It was written by so many different teams in so many different industries with so many different parts that no human being could know it all. They couldn't possibly test it all because 22,000 man-years is an astonishing number. Okay, ask any biologist, any chemist, any neurologist the following question. What is more sophisticated, the space shuttle or a human baby? Anyone who understands basic science will tell you that there's no comparison. The human baby is a chemical machine that's so vastly more sophisticated and intricate than the space shuttle that it is in a league in and of itself. Zero basis for comparison because it's vastly more complex. Okay, here's the question. Where did the baby come from? So as you know, the baby began with two cells. The egg cell, which is the largest cell in the human being, almost visible to the naked eye, and the sperm cell, which is 100 times smaller. These two cells unite, and from these two cells come the trillions upon trillions of cells called the human baby, including the brain, the pancreas, the stomach, the lungs, the skin, the liver, all the different organs. How does the cells know to divide, to become the skin, to become the nails, to become the brain, to become the eyes? So as you know, it's really quite simple. It's something called DNA. But if you understand what DNA is, you'll have a tremendous, tremendous insight. DNA is the computer programming contained within each cell that tells the cell what to do. But the DNA coding is so submicroscopic that no human being can see it. Under 100,000 power, they believe that they can see sort of the shadow of the double helix. They're not sure. So what I'm saying to you is as follows. 22,000 man-years to write the coding of the space shuttle, and that's considered archaic and simplistic compared to the human baby. And all of the coding of the human baby is contained in every single cell. Every single cell contains all of the coding to create the entire baby. That's so submicroscopic that under 100,000 power can't be seen. When you understand the vastness and sophistication of that, you say, Marabu Masech Hashem, this is astonishing, this is wondrous, and you come to real Yiras Shamayim, you come to really appreciate God, you come to a very different relationship to your Creator. To do this, you have to put back the wow. You have to put back the excitement. You have to think about the wonders. And when you do that, you relate to Hashem in a very different measure. And Hashem grant us the wisdom, understanding, and ability to put this into practice.